Welcome to Krackin Canuckleheads, covering the Seattle Kraken, the Vancouver Canucks, and of course the Pacific Division of the National Hockey League. And what a pleasure it is today to welcome in a 50-year veteran of professional hockey broadcasting who has recently announced that this is his final season. Nick Nickson, honored by the Hockey Hall of Fame in 2015 with the Foster Hewitt Award. We're going to talk to him about his career a little bit, some of the memories, the Stanley Cups, Drew Doughty, the current team, and some Anze Kopitar talk as well. It's great stuff. Here it comes. It's Nick Nickson. Oh my gosh, and there he is, the man, the myth, the legend, Nick Nickson himself. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Nice to be back for another hockey season, and nice to be back talking to you.
Well, I'll tell you what, we can't beat around the bush here. You announced a couple of weeks back that this is it, your final season. Man, how does that? I know how the fans feel. How does that feel for you?
Well, I'm pretty good with it. I've been thinking about this for a couple of years now, and actually, I was planning on last season being my final season. But before last season started, the Kings made some changes with the talent on the TV side, and they asked me to do the TV play-by-play, and we would go back to a simulcast, doing it with Jim Fox and Darrell Evans. And at some point in the meeting, Luc Robitaille said, "Yeah, okay, great. I'm glad you want to do it, but can you do it for 2 more seasons?" So I said, "All right, yeah, I'll check with the boss," and my wife was good with it. And so this will be my final season behind the microphone, my 44th with the Kings, and it's my 50th calling pro hockey. I started out in the American Hockey League in the 75-76 season with the Rochester Americans.
Wow.
Then I did 4+ seasons with the New Haven Nighthawks before joining LA. So the way it's turned out, 50 is a nice round number, right? So yeah, this will be it after 50 seasons of calling games.
Damn, that's amazing. Congratulations. I was at your luncheon in 2015 when you received the Foster Hewitt, and we were just chatting briefly before we got started. It feels like 3 years ago, Nick. I can't believe that was almost a decade ago.
Well, I think for all of us that are getting on in years, what we think of as 3 years ago is really double or triple that, right?
but that's got to be an honor that still resonates with you.
Yeah, I think anytime you get recognized by your peers in any business, it's something that you really have to take to heart. And I'd like to think that it's been more than just my service of all the years of doing professional hockey. I've worked with some great people who've made me a better broadcaster, starting with another Hall of Famer back in 1981, Bob Miller. Bob and I did the games for 9 years. And over the time that I've been with the Kings, I've been with Brian Engblom, Mike Allison, Cammy Granato, Darrell Evans, I've been with for over 25 years now. And of course, now on the TV side with Jim Fox. So you learn something every game from these former athletes. And I've been really blessed to have been surrounded by wonderful talent. And some of it's rubbed off on me, I think.
You're very humble. Did you ever get used to, by the way, Darrell Evans' suits?
I got used to those about, let's see, he's been with me. This is his 26th season. I would say about 3 weeks into his first season.
Sometimes you need to wear sunglasses.
Yeah, and sometimes we have to remind Darrell that it is just radio tonight. But no, he enjoys it. And I know over the years, a lot of what the fans see Darrell wearing night after night, I think he donates them to charity. They kind of raffle them off and raise money for different foundations. So good for him. Good for him.
There's a guy on the other coast, Joe Beninati, the play-by-play in Washington, who's similar
Yeah.
in terms of collecting suits. I don't think they're as bright, but he's well known for his suit collection. 6-1, by the way, Tuesday night, smoked by Vegas. LA, of course, still 3-2-2, not a bad start. But what's your impression through the first little portion here?
Yeah. Getting somewhat, I think, Rob, a read on the team, although that comes with a caveat. The Kings have not played a home game yet.
Oh yeah,
They played 6 games in the preseason, all on the road. They started out with 7 on the road, 5 back east, and now Anaheim and Vegas earlier this week, all because they were renovating Crypto.com Arena. So I think to really get a real good book on what the team is all about, we've got to see them play 4 or 5 at home too. But early on, I think there is an adjustment period. You've got Jim Hiller, first full season as coach. He's changed the system from a 1-3-1 that everybody hated whenever we went to visit their teams. But we were playing to our strength at the time. And Jim is trying to open it up more for forwards, going to a 1-2-2 or a 2-1-2 at times. New faces. Opening night, we had 4 lines that were all new from last year, 3 sets of defense that were all new from last year, and a starting goaltender that wasn't here last year. So that's a lot of change. I think they wanted to be tougher, a little bit bigger, which is why they brought in Tanner Jeannot, Fogle, Joel Edmondson, and a couple of other young players. This kid, Andre Lee, is 6'5" and has been in the lineup every night, so good for him. But I think it's really too early to get a read on exactly where the strengths and the weaknesses are on this hockey team. It's still led up front by Anze Kopitar in his 19th season. And boy, over the years, the last 6-7 years, we've said, okay, someone's got to take over for it. Well, Kopitar still does it. He still leads the team or is amongst the top on the score sheet after every season. So, that is a constant. Adrian Kempe has developed into a fabulous all-around threat, plays in all situations, power play, penalty kill. Deneau and Moore are responsible forwards up front. But one thing I will say, Rob, after 7 games, they do miss Drew Doughty. Because he plays all the minutes. He's led the Kings in ice time every year he's been in the league, and this is his 17th year. And he's the quarterback on the number 1 power play. He kills penalties. He's out there when you're protecting a lead. He'll play the final 3 minutes of any given game. So, I think they're figuring out just how valuable Drew is at this point. There are question marks, and we'll see going forward if this is a team can match the 99 points they had last year or come close to it, which likely would get them into the playoffs.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about the Doughty and can they last and how long they can last with the Spences and the Englands and the Clarks and all this. But, you mentioned Kopitar leading, just being a great leader and a scorer, but by example, the 200-foot game, the Kings have made the playoffs 3 years in a row. I don't think most folks out east realize this, that they're just a constant threat. And here, I tell you what, after 8 games, if you come out of that with 10 points, which you could play in San Jose, I mean, it's just more of the same.
Yeah, and when the season started, we ended the preseason in Quebec, played a couple of games there in their building, the big building, which is beautiful, by the way. It's NHL ready. They'd love to get a team, obviously. But we said when the regular season started, a lot of us said if we can go 3-2-2 and come home and then get a bunch of home games, we'll take it. And what is their record?
Right.
3-2-2 with all road games. So I think they're in a good place, right? They've got to feel good about themselves. There have been some highs and lows. You mentioned the Vegas game, last night, 6-1 loss. The game in Toronto wasn't good, but, they played some good teams close. And with all the changes that I mentioned earlier, they're still trying to sort things out.
A concept I was chatting about a few weeks back was Quinton Byfield, whether or not that contract that he signed will actually be considered a great deal for the club by the time he plays it out. Do you see it? Is he finally taking the steps?
Yeah, I think he is. Now, the last year and a half, he was playing with two pretty good players, Kopitar and Kempe,
Yeah.
and Quinton was on the left side. Now, he's playing and starting to produce in that year and a half span as a 20 and a 21-year-old.
Right.
Still a very young player.
Yeah.
To start the season, they wanted him in the middle because they know in a couple of years, Anze Kopitar is not going to be there. Philip Deneau is getting up there in years. So at some point, if you prognosticate into the future, Quinton is slated to be the number one center on this hockey club. So the time for him to switch had to come at some time, and apparently it is now. Although the last couple of games, they moved him up to left wing with Kopitar, but I fully expect that for most of this season, he'll be in the middle. And then they have to figure out the best fit for him in terms of line mates. They've got Kevin Fiala, who moves all over the place in the lineup and is a talented player. So I fully expect that the Kings expect that Quinton Byfield is going to be a center, their number one center moving forward, maybe next year or certainly 2 years from now.
Right. You kind of alluded to potential weaknesses for the club, and part of that had to do with Doughty's injury.
Yeah.
The strengths of this club, you talked about Kopitar, and it might be the consistency. He might be such a key cog, that the consistency of discipline to systems. Because let's face it, this team's not making the playoffs by scoring like the Oilers, right? And
right.
You mentioned Jim Hiller taking over. Is it the discipline to systems, discipline in general?
Yeah, with Kopitar, he's been in the league so long, you really don't have to change anything with the way he plays, right? I mean, you could come in and I mentioned the 1-3-1 and the 1-2-2 and the 2-1. You could play a 0-0-5 or a 5-0-0, and Kopitar's not going to change the way he plays the game. Right. And give him his marks, because early in his career as a King, then Coach Terry Murray stressed the defensive aspect of it. And he's like a third defenseman out there whenever he's on the ice. He has been. Rob, he last year he passed, I'm going to get on the Kopitar bandwagon here.
Sorry.
Last year he passed 7 Hall of Famers on the all-time scoring list.
Right.
He's now tied with Jean Beliveau for 45th all-time in points. By the time he retires, he'll be the Kings' all-time leading scorer, passing Marcel Dion. He'll probably be top 30, top 35 all-time.
Yep.
And he's doing this. He's getting this production with a game that stifles his production because he's so responsible on the defensive end.
Yep.
And it's worked. It's worked for him. It's worked for the Kings over the years, because they do have Stanley Cups in 2012 and 2014. And both years, by the way, Kopitar led the league in scoring. So he was doing it all and continues to. But, I think people that don't get the chance to watch Anze Kopitar on a regular basis don't appreciate how good, how valuable he has been week to week, season to season. And his numbers speak for themselves. We don't take him for granted, and we shouldn't, because he's been one of the best all around. You go through the list of all the centers in NHL history, all the Hall of Famers, and he's probably 8, top 10 overall centers of all time.
Right. Well, there's the East Coast bias, because I can tell you that's part of it, because a lot of folks out east in the centers of the media world don't really watch a whole lot of West Coast hockey. I mean, the hardcores, and many of us do, but many don't. And people are overlooked. And you mentioned Fiala and Kempe. I mean, these two guys to me are a couple of more underrated guys in the league, just based on that, probably that same fact. You got the 2 cups, which is fantastic. Once as an 8 seed, coming from out of nowhere, if I recall. That still has to be obviously your greatest memories.
Oh, for sure. A number of us had been in the organization for over 30 years. Myself, Bob Miller, longtime trainer Pete Demers, and we would kiddingly say, season after season, when it got to be November and we were 10 points out of the playoffs, we're never going to see it, are we? We're never going to see it.
Right.
Well, they came out of nowhere, as you alluded to, the 8th seed. And the way they did it that year, doing stuff that had never been done before, beating seeds 1, 2, and 3, 10 straight wins on the road. The quick numbers are still like the benchmark for any goalie that's going to play in the NHL moving forward. I mean, Quick was just phenomenal that playoff run. So it all came together, and it's interesting because after that Stanley Cup, I looked up the record book for the Kings. The only time in club history, they went 16-4 that playoff year. The only time in club history they won 16 out of 20 games was in that playoff year. So you talk about picking the right moment to peak.
Yeah.
That was it that spring in 2012.
It's funny you mentioned the 10 road wins. It's a team that plays a good road game every game, whether they're home or road.
Yeah, exactly. And when Jonathan Quick was here for all those years, no matter who coached, it was Terry Murray, of course, Daryl Sutter for the Cup years. John Stevens then took over for Daryl for a while. You built the team around great goaltending, and why not? That's why the Kings were so good defensively. And they had good defenders led by Drew Doughty and the two-way center in Anze Kopitar. So players coming into the system saw the way Doughty played, saw the way Kopitar played. It says, okay, I know it works because you've won 2 cups. So, okay, let's keep it going. Let's keep it going. But now, because a lot of those players have moved on and it's been 10 years removed from the second Stanley Cup, the way you approach the game is changing a bit.
Hey, Nick, last thing here. And also with the team changing, becoming successful, finding success in the new building and all that. I went to a couple of games at the Forum back in the day. And that's just another transformation that's rather amazing, because there were probably some nights early on when you were looking at the crowds going, man, are we going to make this happen? Like, you must have great memories though, eh?
Yeah. It was compared to a lot of, not just Crypto.com Arena, which has the suite levels, and it's a massive building like the United Center, the Bell Center in Montreal. These are huge buildings. But the Great Western Forum, the fabulous forum built by owner Jack Kent Cook, it was more intimate. We were right in the middle of the crowd, the broadcast booths. They took out 9 rows of seats at center ice to put in broadcast tables, so we could see the fans, interact with them. And it was different back then. And the Kings did struggle for a while drawing people. When I started in 1981, wasn't a big draw. They didn't have real good teams, but then it all changed when Wayne Gretzky came in 1988. And matter of fact, Kings were the first team in LA sports history to sell out every game for a season shortly after Gretzky came. So that kind of changed the whole dynamic of the sport, not only in the United States, but certainly in Southern California.
Well, Nick, you just brought up another topic, but we're not going to hit it today because maybe it will circle back towards the end of the season and would do more history stuff, because you just brought up Gretzky, and oh my God, that's a whole, well, you're opening up another treasure chest.
Exactly.
And I got some great fighters and old school hockey type stuff to talk to you about. The Madhouse of Manchester, right?
Yeah, the Miracle on Manchester.
The Miracle on Manchester, but they used to get pretty rambunctious.
Yep. The game, as we all know, was different back then, and it's you mentioned the Forum, and someday we'll revisit that. But this is the 25th, 26th season we've been at Crypto.com Arena, which was Staples for many years. I've actually done more games at Crypto.com Arena than I did at the Forum, which is that's how time has passed us all.
Yeah. God, I can't believe it's 25 years.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I hope you guys make another little run here in your final season. Well, you say it's your final season, Nick.
But I think I'm pretty good with it. Yeah, I've enjoyed every bit of it. And thanks to the fans over the years for their great, kindful words. And I've enjoyed it. It's been great. I was lucky. I did it. I started doing my first pro games in the AHL when I was 22. So this is all I've done my whole entire adult life, and it's uh, it's been a blast. It's been a blast. Really loved it.
Well, it's always a blast talking to you, always a blast seeing you, and hopefully we'll do it again. And good luck this season, Nick. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thanks again, Rob.
Stay tuned. More great guests coming up in the next few days, the next week here on Krackin Canuckleheads. You can check out some detailed information at seattlehockeyinsider.com, vancouverhockeyinsider.com. Twitter/X is at Simmerpuck, and the YouTube channel you can subscribe, also known as Simmerpuck. Thank you very much for checking us out. Thanks to Nick Nickson. Go Kings, go. We'll talk to you soon on the next edition of Krackin Canuckleheads. Later.